In our news tonight, His Majesty holds talks at Al-Husseiniya Palace with King Felipe of Spain, who arrived in Jordan to take part in the World Economic Forum, which opens tomorrow by the Dead Sea. Head of Syria's government delegation to Geneva talks, Bashar al-Ja'fari, describes a U.S. strike in Syria yesterday as government terrorism that caused a massacre. And Emmanuel Macron says France will continue to shoulder the military burden of fighting terrorists in North and West Africa during a visit to French troops in Mali. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty King Abdullah received at Al-Husseiniya Palace King Felipe of Spain, who arrived in Jordan to take part in the World Economic Forum, which opens tomorrow by the Dead Sea shores. His Majesty's meeting with King Felipe dealt with the historic relations between the two countries, as well as ongoing developments in the region. The meeting was followed by expanded talks attended by senior officials from both sides to discuss ways of increasing bilateral economic and investment cooperation, as well as joint ventures in the energy and infrastructure sectors. The talks over a dinner banquet in honor of King Felipe and his accompanying delegation also dealt with Mideast peace efforts. The two sides were in agreement on the need to revive Palestinian-Israeli peace negotiations based on a two-state solution as the only option to end the conflict. His Majesty and the Spanish monarch were also in agreement that only a political solution would end regional conflicts and help reinstate peace and security in the Middle East. King Felipe hailed His Majesty's approach to challenges facing the region and commended the kingdom's efforts to accommodate the needs of Syrian refugees. Under the theme, Enabling a Generational Transformation, the World Economic Forum for the Middle East and North Africa opens by the Dead Sea tomorrow. In partnership with the King Abdullah II Fund for Development, the meeting will convene over 1,000 government, business and civil society leaders from more than 50 countries. His Majesty King Abdullah, and in the presence of Queen Rania, leads the official opening of the forum. The meeting was last hosted in the kingdom in 2015, and this meeting is the 9th to convene by the Dead Sea. One of the main topics at the meeting is titled Innovation Jordan, which will host a number of entrepreneurs and focus on opportunities available for youth innovation. Other major topics to be deliberated include the moral responsibility of protecting refugees, new models for investment for countries in transition, dealing with extremism, the water crisis, and building for peace. His Royal Highness Crown Prince Hussein will deliver the keynote address at the opening session. Jordan and Switzerland signed a memorandum of understanding on political and security consultation aimed at fostering cooperation between the two countries. Minister of Foreign and Expatriate Affairs Ayman al-Safadi signed the MOU with his Swiss counterpart Didier Belkhaltier at a meeting here in Amman. The meeting also affirmed the need for further economic cooperation as well as in education and tourism. Safadi and the Swiss official also discussed regional conflicts and efforts to find a political solution to the Syria crisis, in addition to Switzerland's support to projects benefiting Syrian refugees and host communities in Jordan. A recent project funded by the Swiss government in cooperation with UNICEF served Azra refugee camp with potable water. To Iraq, and fresh terror attacks in the southern province of Basra left several people killed. Two suicide car bombers blew themselves up at checkpoints on a highway near oil fields in the province, according to an Interior Ministry statement. Iraq's South Oil Company said there was no disruption to operations, but officials said oil police were put on maximum alert in response to the attack. The victims included 2 soldiers, a traffic policeman, and an unknown number of civilians traveling in a bus. The ministry statement said the first blast took place at the Rumaila checkpoint and the second around 1 kilometer away at another checkpoint called Al Sadra. Elsewhere in Iraq, and as Iraqi forces make a final push for control of Mosul, they are faced with new tactics by Daesh. The terrorists have been planting bombs to prevent civilians from leaving Mosul and using abandoned vehicles to make roadblocks. But to overcome their tactic, Iraqi forces have employed bulldozers. This footage, uploaded by the Iraqi media, shows the moment a bulldozer driven by an Iraqi security force member tackles an explosive-filled car driven by a suicide bomber. The bulldozer confronts a dust-covered car driving towards it and uses the vehicle's front bucket to push the car towards a nearby building, which then explodes. According to the security force member driving the bulldozer, when the suicide bomber found himself blocked, he blew himself up. Moving to the Syria crisis, and head of Syria's government delegation to Geneva talks, Bashar al-Ja'fari, described a U.S. strike in Syria yesterday as government terrorism that caused a massacre. Speaking in Geneva, Ja'fari told reporters that he had raised the incident with UN Syria envoy Staffan de Mistura. He said such actions would increase the pressure on his government and only help the opposition. While the U.S. has said it carried out the airstrike against militia supported by the Syrian government that posed a threat to U.S. forces in the country's south, Russia called the attack as an unacceptable breach of Syrian sovereignty. Russian media quoted the Deputy Foreign Minister Gennady Gatilov as saying the strike would hamper a political solution to the conflict. In the West Bank, 4 Palestinians were injured by Israeli army fire in the Gaza Strip when hundreds demonstrated in support of Palestinian inmates on hunger strike in Israeli prisons. A Palestinian Health Ministry spokesperson said a youth suffered critical wounds in the abdomen by Israeli fire east of Khan Yunis, while 3 others suffered moderate injuries east of Gaza City. Hundreds of Palestinians demonstrated on the eastern border of the Gaza Strip in answer to calls made by different Palestinian factions yesterday. They are standing in solidarity with Palestinian inmates who have been holding an open-ended strike in protest against poor conditions in prisons and Israeli policy of detention without trial that has been applied against thousands since the 1980s. Millions of Iranians voted in a tight presidential election to choose between frontrunners Hassan al-Rouhani and Ibrahim Raisi. Rouhani, who swept into office 4 years ago, promising to open Iran to the world and give citizens more freedom at home, faces a strong challenge from hardline Judge Raisi. For ordinary Iranians, the election presents a stark choice between competing visions of the country. 56 million Iranians out of the roughly 80 million strong population are eligible to vote. All ballots will be counted manually, and the final result may not be announced for 2 days. If no candidate wins more than 50% plus 1 vote of all ballots cast, a runoff between the 2 top candidates will be held on the first Friday after the result is declared. French President Emmanuel Macron, on his first trip abroad, visited French troops fighting radical jihadists in Mali. He said France will continue to shoulder the military burden of fighting terrorists in North and West Africa, but that Germany and other European countries can do more. Macron's visit to Mali fulfills a campaign promise and underlines the importance he places on combating terrorists in Mali. We will be uncompromising towards them, he told a news conference in Gao, where some 1,600 French soldiers are based.
La France est engagée depuis le début.
Julian Assange described today's drop of rape charges against him as an important victory for him and the UN human rights system. He said, however, WikiLeaks will continue its publications. But But he also said he is willing to engage in dialogue with the UK and the US who want to arrest him. Swedish prosecutors dropped the investigation into an allegation of rape against him, but British police said he would still be arrested if he left the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he has been holed up for nearly 5 years. Here's more.
The investigation into rape allegations against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been dropped. Swedish prosecutors saying there are no further avenues to pursue. The decision brings an end to a 7-year legal standoff and is being heralded as a total victory by Assange's defence lawyer. But the Australian is still a wanted man. Assange has been holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London since 2012. Skipping bail to take refuge there to avoid extradition to Sweden over the allegation, which he denies. He feared Sweden would hand him over to the United States, where he would face prosecution over WikiLeaks' publication of thousands of classified military and diplomatic documents, one of the largest information leaks in US history. With the threat of extradition removed, Assange could potentially leave the embassy. However, UK police said on Friday he will be arrested if he does, saying a warrant for the 45-year-old's arrest was issued when he failed to surrender to the court on the 29th of June 2012, and stating the Metropolitan Police Service is obliged to execute that warrant.
Deputy U.S. Attorney General Rod Rosenstein conducted a classified briefing at Capitol Hill for the full House of Representatives on President Donald Trump's firing of FBI Director James Comey. Comey's dismissal last week set off a series of jarring developments that culminated on Wednesday in the Justice Department's appointment of special counsel to probe possible ties between Russia and Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Rosenstein, the #2 Justice Department official, named former FBI Director Robert Mueller amid mounting pressure in Congress for an independent investigation beyond the existing FBI and congressional probes into the Russia issue. On Twitter, Trump criticized the naming of Mueller as a special counsel by Rosenstein, an official he himself appointed. A little-seen painting by Jean-Michel Basquiat was sold for a record price at Sotheby's yesterday. The vibrant, untitled 1982 portrait achieved the 6th highest price for any work of art at auction and also set records for an American artist as well as for the deceased artist. Here's more.
$8 million, $59 million now. $65 million on the telephone now.
This rarely glimpsed painting by Jean-Michel Basquiat has sold for a whopping $110.5 million, the highest auction price ever for an American artist.
Thank you, Yuki. Congratulations. Thank you.
It was originally expected to fetch roughly half that amount, and it's a huge jump for the untitled work, which sold for only $19,000 in 1984. Basquiat died 4 years later of a heroin overdose, aged 27, but today's price puts him into a pantheon of greats, including Andy Warhol and Pablo Picasso. The sale coming down to a good old-fashioned bidding war in New York.
Totally thrilling. I mean, it really is such a privilege to have handled this extraordinary picture, and we had a electrifying 10-minute bidding battle on the picture, which I think was pure drama. I mean, this is what the auction theatre is really all about.
The canvas was bought by the founder of the e-commerce firm Start Today, Yasuku Maezawa, who intends to lend it to public art exhibits before retiring to his home in his native Japan.
In our fitness and well-being piece this evening, we feature the Japanese martial art of Iaido. Developed as a defensive method to counter surprise attacks and enemy raids in 15th and 16th century Japan, a rough translation of Iaido conveys the idea that one must always be prepared for any eventuality and handle problems with swift resolve. More on this ancient samurai art and the scene in Jordan in this report. Drawing of the sword, and on a basic level, Iaido is about how to use the sword. To be more precise, how to draw the sword from its sheath, strike or cut an opponent, remove blood from the blade, and then replace the sword in its sheath, all in one motion.
But although these are basic Iaido kata, the preset series of movements initially developed to overcome an enemy, Iaido's ultimate aim is to cultivate the spirit, to master not drawing the sword at all. Iaido nowadays represents the intrinsic form of Japanese Budo, a philosophy and a way of life that utilizes the martial arts as a means of self-improvement.
Iaido is a journey. It is a journey where you go down a path where you think you know things and discover that it's just the tip of the iceberg and there's so much more. It's a journey of not just learning how to use the sword, it's a journey for life. It teaches you patience, it teaches you inner peace. It teaches you to look at the world in a different way.
During Iaido training, most practitioners use unsharpened practice swords called Iaito, but some use real swords, shinken, with the permission of their teachers. There is also no opponent to confront. One needs to create an imaginary opponent when training. And although this is the basic idea, in reality one is conquering the enemy within oneself, confronting one's own limitations and imperfections. Through this form of mental training using the sword, one learns through repetition, discipline, respect, about fear and courage, staying focused and being present. The secret to Iaido is a calm and serene spirit.
We have a quote in Iaido that says, Saya no uchi no kachi, which means achieving victory before you draw the sword from the saya. That means that you should use the peace in your all aspects of life to better yourself and to deal with others. To train Iaido, you need a calm spirit, so it teaches you to really be so calm and be really aware of the surroundings.
It teaches me to be patient. I am a very impulsive person, so it teaches me how to breathe. When you breathe, the energy of life flows into you.
The Japanese martial art of Iaido, introduced to Jordan in 1993 by Sara Kabariti and which came under the umbrella of the Jordan Judo Federation in 2000, is about to see the dawn of a new era with recent new developments.
After such a long period as the Jordan Kendo Committee, we have the green light from the Jordan Olympic Committee to actually become a federation, which is really great and exciting news for us because it allows us to expand our base, get more people, get better financial support. It raises our standard amongst the Europeans when we go to compete.
Many of the greatest Iaido practitioners today are in their late 90s and still train daily. As the journey of honing one's character and skill is endless, this should come as no surprise. It is said that the sword is like the mind. If the sword is upright, the mind is upright. If the mind isn't so, then the sword can never be wielded properly. If you are looking for something beyond just a physical workout, a polishing of your character and life, then you have found your key. But know that once you open that door, destination does not exist, as the road is a journey of never-ending learning and perfection. The philosophy of Iaido speaks to the spirit. May the spirits of the ancient warriors of Japan, the samurai, accompany you on your journey. This is Dana Abusham for the News at 10.
Unseeded John Isner of the United States moved into the semifinals of the Italian Open in Rome with a 7-6, 2-6, 7-6 win over 6th seed Marin Cilic of Croatia. In a tight opening set, Isner took 4 points off Cilic's serve in the tie-break to win it 7-3. The final set followed the pattern of the first, with the American again dominating the tie-break to complete victory in 2 hours, 39 minutes. Isner will play the winner of the second quarter-final between Milos Raonic of Canada and Germany's Alexander Zverev.
Jogo. Partita in control. Game 7 match is done. 7-6, 2-6, 7-6.
American Andrew Talansky narrowly outsprinted Polish overall leader Rafał Majka to the finish line to win Stage 5 yesterday in the mountains east of Los Angeles. Cannondale Drapak rider Talansky crossed the finish line atop Mount Baldy in 3 hours 43 minutes and 15 seconds to claim his first Tour of California stage win. Majka's second-place stage finish kept him in the overall lead by just 6 seconds over New Zealander George Bennett, who crossed the finish line in third place. American Team Sky rider Ian Boswell sits in third place overall, another 19 seconds back of Bennett. And finally, to the weather outlook. Cool and windy conditions continue for the rest of tonight, with winds reaching 70 kilometers per hour, accompanied by possible showers, especially in the northern parts of the kingdom. Tomorrow, a drop in temperatures is expected, with 5 to 6 degrees below seasonal average. More light rain is expected in the early morning hours, accompanied by gusty and dusty winds. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a relatively hot day tomorrow, with northerly moderate winds and choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. A reminder of our top stories before we end the news. His Majesty holds talks at Al-Husayniya Palace with King Felipe of Spain, who arrived in Jordan to take part in the World Economic Forum, which opens tomorrow by the Dead Sea. Head of Syria's government delegation to Geneva talks, Bashar al-Ja'fari, describes a U.S. strike in Syria yesterday as government terrorism that caused a massacre. And Emmanuel Macron says France will continue to shoulder the military burden of fighting terrorists in North and West Africa during a visit to French troops in Mali. We've reached the end of tonight's news. I'm Dana Abusham. Thanks for watching and have a good night.